Hi, it's the Silly Moustache here. I get a lot of comments and questions about my 12 fret guitars. And mostly the questions are why. So I'm going to try and explain that a little bit. I did a video to explain this back in 2017. But I was still very ill, recovering from the cancer treatment, and I don't think I was very easy to understand. I hope I will be a little bit easier today, and I'm just going to revisit that. First of all, a bit of my personal guitar history. In 1965 I bought my first guitar. It cost me £16 new. I graduated through a couple of things to a Harmony H1265, which was a very flashy Harmony jumbo style, sunburst and great big lumps of plastic all over the place. I loved it, but my skills were very, very basic. I liked the idea of American-made guitars because those were what I saw played by my stars on television and on album covers. So I went through a number of things from 68 to 70. I went through Gibson J50, Guild D40, Epiphone Frontier, even a Gibson SJ200. But in 1970, I think it was, I got my first Martin Dreadnought. And from 1970 to 1975, I bought and sold a number of Martin Dreads, usually because they needed neck resets, which couldn't be done at that time. Also, I didn't understand the difference between a D18 and a D28, and possibly a lot of Brazilian rosewood guitars went through my hands for a few pence in those days. In 1975, I acquired a 1973 build D35. It had a repaired broken neck, but it had such a beautiful tone, and I played that guitar from 1975 until 1996 with no issues whatsoever. And a good friend of mine now plays it still. So it's 50 years old this year. Or was it last year? Yeah. So I replaced that D35 with a Martin J40. I don't know what I was thinking, but there we are. It had a very, very, very shallow neck, 1 11/16, and it just cramped my style, really did. And I was playing it one night when I was doing an opening set for a gentleman called Isaac Guillory. And Isaac Guillory was known to play a Martin D35S, 12 fret with a 1 7/8 net. And he kindly lent it to me for my set. It was perfection. It solved all my problems. And so I commenced a search then for a similar guitar, Martin D18 2835 stroke S, which doesn't stand for slope, it stands for standard, actually. It's the original standard Dreadnought. I had realised then that for my playing style, with lots of hammer-ons and pull-offs and runs and fills, that to play cleanly I needed the extra string spacing. So I searched and searched and searched in London and the area, and even in States when I visited. And in 1999 I ambled into a London shop called the Acoustic Centre, no longer there sadly, and met a great guy, sales guy called Seamus Brady. He asked me what I was looking for, and I said I want a 12 fret Dread, and he said, oh, I'll make a note. And I thought, yeah, okay, fine. But just a few weeks later he called me back and said, if you're still looking for that 12 fret Dread, I've got some things for you to see. Come up as soon as possible, which I did. And he had a Martin HD 28 VS 1 3/4 nut, a Santa Cruz D12 1 3/4 nut, and a Bourgeois DS260, I can't remember that was, and this thing called a Collings DS2H. Not this one, it was an earlier one built in 1998, brand new though from here. I think it was the first of two Collings, the first two Collings to come into the UK, new. And I came home with the DS2H, and I think Seamus kept the other one. So let me now just talk about the difference between the 12 fret design versus the 14 fret. So the 12 fret design is the original one. Now, all Martin flat tops were 12 frets from 1833 up until 1929. And from 1902 to 1931, this was the largest Martin you could get. This is a O Auditorium. And this was the one that was butchered to make into a 14 fret. Give you a little bit of backstory on that. Chap called Perry Bechtel went to Martin's and said, basically, I want a guitar that plays like a banjo. He was a banjo player. Tenor banjos in dance bands were moving out as Dixieland turned to swing, and so he wanted a longer neck. He wanted 15 frets to the body. They couldn't do that. They compromised on 14, and a much thinner neck because he wasn't going to play all those strings anyway. He was used to 4 strings, and they made a slab headstock, which they had done before, but basically there's no advantage to the slab headstock apart from the fact that they're cheaper and quicker to make. They do have advantages for the player, but I'll talk about that later, maybe. So about Martin also used to make a sort of dreadnought, a style 1 and a style 2, for a company called Ditson. And one of the guys at Ditson said, I think it would be a good idea to make these big fat ones, but then they went out of business in 1929 anyway. And as Martin had the molds and stuff like that in 1931, they thought they would try to introduce this shape, which was not successful. I don't know whether they sold a half a dozen or so. So they discontinued it. 1931 introduced, 1933 discontinued. Great shame, perfect design. And they tried to do the same job on the Dreadnought that they did on the O to turn it into an OM. In fact, the first 14 fret Dreadnoughts were called OMs, but they didn't work in bands any more than the O. The arch tops had that. The 1934 Dreadnoughts were 14 frets, and that was it. And people think that this is a new idea. It's not. It was the original Dreadnought. Okay. Now let's just talk about the positive aspects of these. First of all, if you need it, it has a wider nut and a wider string spacing, meaning a wider fretboard. And if you've got flat fingers like mine, that's a benefit. Okay. It doesn't matter for a lot of people. It does for me. So wider string spacing. People talk about the better placement of the bridge, which is true. It's a little bit more centrally placed in the lower bout. I don't know whether that adds to the tone compared to a 14 fret, so I'm not going to comment on that. But what I do know is it tends to bring my pick right over there on the sweet spot. So that's perfect for me and my forearm length. Some people say it has more resonance because of that. I don't know about that. Slotted headstock. First of all, for the player, it's easier to adjust the tuning when you're standing or sitting playing. You're not doing this contortion business, and we know how guitarists' wrists can be damaged. It's actually easier to change strings on a slotted headstock than a flat headstock, but of course it's what you're used to. Scale. I've seen videos where people say that because it's a 12 fret, it's a shorter scale. No, it's not. The 25.4 inch scale from Martin came about with the O Auditorium. So this is exactly the same scale as a 14 fret Dreadnought, and I don't think it makes any difference to the tone, and I've even seen people saying that it makes a difference to the string tension. It cannot do. That's not true. Let's talk about the perceived disadvantages of the 12 fret design, and the most common thing is going to say it's more difficult getting up here. Someone even suggested that I should have one made with a cutaway. I don't need to be up here. If you're playing rhythm guitar, you know, on an arch top, and you want to do a C, I do it like that. Some people need to do it like that, and now my wrist is touching the heel. So no, it's not practical for that sort of style. It's not a rhythm guitar in that sense, that 14 fret or the arch top more appropriately. Yes, as someone said in a previous video that I've responded to, they need to play up here, which I don't see the point of. Then they need a cutaway or a 14 fret or both or something like that. Also, they were difficult to get. 12 frets were difficult to get. That was a disadvantage. Martin reintroduced them in the mid-60s with the D28/S, which doesn't stand for slope. It stands for standard, because this was the standard design. And they brought out the HD28VS in 98 till about 2018, but all of them with very low numbers and 1 3/4 nets on the HD VSs. So there we are. I'm indebted to Isaac Guillory, who first introduced me to this concept and solved a lot of my problems, but started an enormous hunt that has gone on until today to get 12 fret guitars, and to Seamus Brady, late of the Acoustic Centre, for his diligence in finding those guitars for me in 1999. So there we are. That's my little rundown about my preference for 12 fret guitars. If you have been, thanks for watching.